Welcome to the Holistic Kids Show. My name is Dane.
My name is Iman.
And my name's Carson.
We are the Holistic Kids here to educate and empower us kids from the inside out.
More and more kids today are dealing with being tired. And it's not just like I'm tired of school and I'm tired of homework. Kids today are like just tired.
Yeah, so if you're tired of being tired, we have the perfect expert for you, Dr. Evan Hirsch. Dr. Evan Hirsch is a world-renowned fatigue and long haulers expert and founder for Fatigue. Through his and the founder and CEO of International Center for Fatigue. Through his best-selling book, podcast, and international online programs, he has helped thousands of people worldwide resolve their ME/CFS and long hauler symptoms naturally. He has been featured on television, podcasts, and summits, and when he's not at office, you can find him singing musicals, dancing, and playing basketball with his family. So we actually had him about like 6 years now. So we are so excited to have him on again now.
How did you go from being a conventional doctor to one that specializes in getting the root cause?
Yeah, we would love to know your story.
Yeah, so my story really started when I was growing up with a mom who was quite holistic, kind of like your mom. And so I always was thinking about approaching things from a natural side of things. But that back then in the 80s, there was no such thing, at least that I knew of a naturopath. I knew that there were chiropractors around, but I didn't know what they did. And so I was good at science and I wanted to help people. And so I decided to go into medical school. And then I had a lot of questions as I was going through, and I ended up finding out about holistic medicine and integrative medicine and functional medicine. And I started learning about those things. And then I created my own functional medicine practice when I finished my family medicine residency. But then I got sick and I had chronic fatigue syndrome. So I was tired all the time. I was napping underneath my desk all the time. It was awful. My relationships were suffering. My business was suffering. And finally, when I was napping underneath my desk, what felt like the millionth day in a row, I knew from my functional medicine training that I just had to find all the causes. And so I went on this mission to find all the causes that I possibly could, read all the books, went to all the conferences, did a bunch of research, and I found out what I was missing. I was missing what I call now the toxic five, which is a combination of toxins and infections and nervous system dysfunction that build up in your body over the course of your life. And as I addressed all those things, I got better from my chronic fatigue. I wrote a book about it, and that became my mission to help people resolve their chronic fatigue. And then 5 years ago, or 6 years ago now, we had long COVID. We had COVID pop up, and unfortunately, people ended up getting symptoms that persisted after they got COVID. And then they ended up developing into what's called now long COVID or long haulers, or chronic fatigue syndrome also. And so we help those people too.
Amazing. I just like love the idea that you turned your pain into like a power, and now you create like your business and everything out of that, and helping so much people all around the world. And I think that's just really amazing. And I think that we could say that, we also did that. And I think a lot of people also did it. And I think it's just so impactful for others, especially when you actually go through something like that.
Right. Well, and I think that it takes a lot of work, like people don't want to have to change their diet. They don't want to have to take supplements, right? You have to be in enough pain where you don't feel good in order to be able to make those changes.
Wow. So what do you mean by like, what's the biggest like mistake people might like get when they just mean like just tired?
Yeah. So a lot of people think that they're just getting older. But the reality is that there are a lot of things that accumulate in our bodies over time that make us tired. And if you really want to have the best quality of life, you have to remove those things. So there are studies to show that when we're born, we have over 300 different chemicals found in baby's cord blood. So basically, we already come out of the womb having a lot of toxins in our bodies. And so then we eat non-organic food and we get pesticides, and then we have exposures to gluten and dairy, and we live in places that have water damage, and we get mold, and then we get mercury or silver fillings in our mouth. And so we're exposed to mercury, and we're exposed to lead paint and all these things. And we have stressful things happen in our lives. And then all of a sudden our body says, you know what? I just have to go to sleep. And so consequently, that's when people end up getting fatigue and their body is really just trying to recover. And so the main mistake that people make is thinking that they're just getting older and that there isn't actual causes. And just because you're a conventional doctor or your naturopath or your functional medicine doctor say that you don't have any causes that they can see doesn't mean that there isn't a reason, because there's always a reason.
Yeah, and so like I know that like a lot this happens like I know it's really big amongst adults, but it's also pretty big like I've seen in school. Like I feel like a lot of kids are always really, really tired. I don't know exactly if it's fatigue, but they seem like they're always tired.
Yeah, it's like what's like the biggest like energy generators for kids today? Like what's making them tired the most? Is it like phones, food, stress, or is there something else that can disrupt that?
The answer is yes. It's all of it. So, one of the biggest things that I hear, I've got a daughter who's 17, and she tells me that she has friends who are drinking coffee every day. They're going to sleep at like 3 o'clock in the morning. They're spending lots of time on their screens. Like it's so much of this comes back to lifestyle habits and developing good practices that are going to serve you into the future. You can't be healthy if you're not getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night and you're not eating organic food. And or I should say it becomes harder to be healthy. If you're not getting enough movement every day, and if you're not drinking enough water. So these are some of the basic foundations that people have to be doing in order to make sure that their body gets all of the nutrition and support that it needs in order to be successful. So that's part of it. And then, unfortunately, the more we're exposed to more things now, over 90,000 different chemicals on a regular basis, tens of thousands of tons of mercury that's dumped into our oceans every single year, from coal plants. There's tons of toxins that we're exposed to on a regular basis, and those consequently end up causing infections to become opportunistic in our bodies. So it's a combination of not having the right lifestyle habits and then being FOS, full of stuff in our bodies that are not serving us.
Amazing. And I think that like things like food and stress and phones and all of those kind of just like they're like they kind of affect us in like everything, not just fatigue, but also in just like how we feel on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's just like so important to get back to those. And yeah, so like what are some like easier like daily habits that can like boost energy like naturally?
So I would say, kind of like what you're talking about is that, if you want your brain to function right, if you want to have good energy, if you don't want to have pain in your body, one of the things that you can really do to help yourself is to start every day off with water. That's the first thing that I do, is that I go into the kitchen, I fill up my water bottle with filtered water, and I try to drink about a liter of water. So that really flushes out all the toxins that have kind of been released over time. While we're sleeping, our brain shrinks about 60%. It's kind of like a sponge that ends up getting squished, and it dumps a bunch of toxins into our body from our brain. And we really want to start off by flushing that out. So that's one of the things that people can do. The other thing that I talked about when you guys came on my podcast was about gratitudes. Starting every day off with gratitudes. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of toxicity, the news, there can be a lot of stress in today's world. And what's really important is to address that by having gratitude. It can be, as Ahmad said yesterday, it can be one thing that you're grateful for. It can be 10 things, but it's really just important to make sure that you have a gratitude practice. So those are kind of two things. I can go into some of these other things if you want me to, but those would be, sometimes less is more. Those would be two things that I would recommend that people start with.
Amazing. And yeah, we don't need you talking about like all the different types of signs. I think just like making it very digestible for a lot of like kids to easily do is also really important.
Yeah, but like, are there any like warning signs, like serious signs that maybe a kid might need to see a doctor?
Yeah, because like who knows if like a lot of times it just might be like they didn't sleep. So how are they supposed to know if they have like fatigue or if they just are a little more tired?
Yeah. So if your energy is not where you want it to be, especially as a kid, you really need to get that looked at. You could have deficiencies in vitamins and minerals and hormones. You could have these toxicities that we're talking about. One of the major chronic illnesses that we're seeing right now is long COVID in kids. It's called MISC, where kids end up getting a viral illness and then those symptoms end up progressing. And when they get that viral illness, they might have fatigue or brain fog or body pain, just not functioning well, but then their symptoms never go away. This COVID virus is different than any virus we've ever seen. And so unfortunately, now MISC, this long COVID in kids, is very rapidly becoming the number one chronic illness in children.
So that's so unfortunate. And I think, like, if we just stick to some of the more basic things, I think that we could definitely like decrease those numbers. And
So what is happening inside the body when someone feels constantly exhausted?
It's a great question, Kasim. So the mitochondria is the energy center of the body, and it's found in every cell in the body except for red blood cells. And it makes about 70 to 90% of our energy, so most of our energy. And so, but the mitochondria is very easily damaged by the toxic five, by heavy metals and chemicals and molds and infections and nervous system dysfunction or trauma that builds up in our body over time. So consequently, the body is really trying to protect itself when it goes into this quiescent mode, or basically this quiet mode. It's called the cell danger response, where the cells and the mitochondria are like, no, it's too dangerous to be functioning right now. I'm going to go to sleep. And the mitochondria stops producing its energy producing compounds, what are called ATP. And so consequently, the body is really just trying to take care of itself, but it really can't function well until we remove the toxic five out of the body.
And I think that one of your toxic fives was trauma. And I mean, you're talking about trauma affecting energy, but like, how does like trauma have to do with managing your energy? And can kids carry stress in their bodies with making them tired? Or like, I don't get how trauma affects energy. So
absolutely. So when we think, we need energy in order to think right, to feel right, in terms of our emotions. So we can, any sort of stressor, whether it's physical, like having these toxins in our bodies, or whether it's mental or emotional by having trauma. There's also generational trauma that we now know about that can be transferred through the genes, from your grandparents and your great-grandparents. And then if your parents had trauma while you were in the womb, all of that can change your hormones, can change your genetics. And so then consequently, when you come out, your body is under more stress. And your hormones are going to be functioning differently. Your mitochondria is going to be functioning differently. It's going to be harder for you to produce the energy that you need. So absolutely, any sort of trauma that people have, and people may think, oh, he's talking about trauma. He's talking about really significant abuse. And so some people are thinking about like physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional, sexual, all those kinds of abuses. But what I'm talking about is any sort of change that you need to make in order to feel safe in your life. I was raised by wonderful parents, but they were imperfect. And they had their own needs that they were trying to meet. I also had two siblings, wonderful people, also imperfect. And so we're all kind of scrambling to get our needs met. And consequently, there's not going to be enough love to go around. And consequently, we end up with a degree of trauma. And trauma really is this gamut. It can be what we call big T trauma, which is like the abuse, or little t trauma, which still changes the way that you see the world. If you believe that you are unsafe at any point, and you believe that every day, that puts a lot of stress on your nervous system, and that ends up leading to trauma and to fatigue. So it definitely can happen in everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that like parents should also like play a big role into this. And I feel like
Yeah, but like, yeah, parents should fit a very, 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 very big role in this. How can like parents like fix this type of trauma or tiredness or fatigue with their children?
So that's a great question because parents are really going to be the ones who identify this in their children, and then are going to be the ones to take their children to the doctor. And so that's really the first step, is to identify it and then say, okay, well, what do I need to do in order to get my child better? And first, it's kind of identifying the symptoms that they have and going through a symptom checklist. And you can start this by going to your conventional provider. And then if you're not getting the questions answered that you need, not getting the help you need, then you go on to a functional medicine provider or a natural medicine provider. And then if you need help beyond that, that would be where somebody really comes to see me. But parents can really start off by evaluating, what are my kids' lifestyle habits? How are they doing with their sleep, with their water intake, with their movement, with their food? And you can make those changes right now, and that's going to get a significant number of people better. And then after that, you can say, okay, well, what deficiencies does my child have? That's when you can get blood tests or urine testing and determine, okay, what are these deficiencies in vitamins, minerals, hormones? And then you can replace those. And then after that, it's all about, okay, now we really need to address if there's any of the toxic 5 present, toxins, infections, etc.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you talk a little about like the 4-step method and about tiredness and fatigue. So
What
Yeah.
does your 4-step method look like in a simple way for kids like us?
Yeah, so the 4 steps are to determine what causes somebody has. So if you're trying to fix a problem and you only address 2 out of the 10 causes, are you going to fix the problem? Maybe a little bit, but you have to make sure you're addressing all of those causes. And generally, when the dominoes start to fall, you end up having about 20 different causes that all need to be addressed. So that can feel overwhelming, but you just have to move through a process of doing that. So that's the first thing, is figure out the causes somebody has. The second thing is to start by replacing the deficiencies that I talked about, deficiencies in lifestyle habits, deficiencies in vitamins and minerals and hormones. The third step is to start opening up the exit pathways. So in order to get things out of our body, as our body is producing waste products, we need to open up the liver and the kidney pathways and the lymph and the neural lymph and the gallbladder and the intestines. We have to make sure people are having a bowel movement at least once a day. And then that's step 3, to make sure we can get all the crap out. And then in step 4, it's really when we want to pull and we want to kill. So that's when we're pulling out the heavy metals and the chemicals and the molds, and then we're killing different infections. And then we're also retraining the nervous system by doing some breath work, and then also by doing the mindset work.
wow.
Amazing.
So yeah, if you definitely need to do that to
Mhm. That'll definitely help. But you mentioned that you have a 17-year-old child. So,
Right.
like, if you had some advice for teenagers listening, what would you give specifically to teenagers?
So, for teenagers listening to this, I know right now you really don't want to listen to your parents, and you really don't want to go to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and you really don't want to drink water, and you really don't want to eat the right foods because they don't taste as good as the soda pop does, or as the donut does, or all these things. And I know that it's really hard because right now, as a teenager, you feel like you're invincible. You feel like nothing can harm you. But unfortunately, the reality is that the decisions that you make today end up determining how the rest of your life plays out. So if you've got big plans, you've got big vision, you want to do some great things in this life, you want to have a lot of fun, you want to make a difference in this world, you want to help a lot of people, then you have to start with yourself. And you have to start with having these daily practices. If look at any of your the people who you want to emulate. Look at, if you want to be great at sports, look at Michael Jordan, look at LeBron James, look at Tom Brady. If you want to be great at business, look at some of those people. They all have practices. Success leaves clues. And if you want to be like somebody else, you got to do what they did. And so much of this comes down to having good practices. My wife has a business called Life Takes Practice. And it's true. Whether we're talking about your health stuff or your mindset work or certain practices that you do in order to prepare yourself for your day, or certain things that you do in order to be able to be successful in life, You have to do those practices.
Wow, that's amazing. And that's just so like that's different than what we were talking about fatigue, but it's so important.
It is.
Yeah. So if you had like what's the most like important doable thing that like
the
any
number one thing.
like your number one thing any kid or teen
Or parent.
can do today?
Like right
To
now.
like get rid of tired or fatigue.
Like
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
now. Like kind of right now.
Yeah, I would say it's going to be sleep. I would say going to sleep earlier and turning your phone off. Ideally taking your phone out of the room, though a lot of teenagers would say, "Oh my gosh, don't do that." So make sure you're turning your phone off and you're not paying attention to it, right? And if you wake up in the middle of the night, don't pay attention to your phone, just go right back to sleep. But I would say sleep would probably be the biggest one. If you're hesitant about going to bed earlier and getting more sleep, I would say it would be water. Trying to drink, depending on how much you weigh, drinking, if you're drinking right now, not much water, go up to 1 liter a day, and then potentially going up to 2 liters as you get older throughout time. It can be, so much of us are living in a state of chronic dehydration. And as a human, we're 80% water. And so we have to be consuming more water.
Amazing. And
yeah.
definitely do that right now. Like you said, like, why are you still here? You should go and do that right now.
Go drink some water.
This podcast was so amazing. You were so inspirational. Where can people learn more about you and your amazing work to follow up?
So you can check me out at fixyourfatigue.com. That'll lead you to my latest masterclass. And you can learn more about my philosophy of care. And if you want to see if we're a good fit to work together, you can apply for a free call where I will do an assessment. About 30% of the time, I tell people we're not a good fit to work together. So it's not a foregone conclusion, but that is the best next step, is to go to that link, fixyourfatigue.com, and see if you like my philosophy.
Amazing. And definitely go check that out because we love Dr. Evan's all of his work and what he's doing. So definitely go check that out.
Yeah, so thank you again for coming on our show. We can't thank you enough for your time and wisdom today.
Yeah, so is there anything else that you would specifically like to add? Is there anything else we left out or something important that you want to make sure like the viewers leave with? Now would be your time.
I think the only other thing that I want to mention is how important gratitude is. You guys talked about it yesterday, but just one thing a day that you're grateful for. It doesn't have to be anything big. You can just say to yourself, I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful for my pets. I'm grateful for my parents. I'm grateful for my grandparents. I'm grateful for the sheets on my bed. I'm grateful for my friends. Just pick one thing. You can say that same thing every day, but what that does is that reprograms your mind and reminds your nervous system that you are safe, you are loved, you are enough, and that will definitely help your energy and your nervous system function.
And that's why I like to say, like, if you like change your lens of your brain, then the world will be so much different. So it's so important to do that. And thank you so much again for coming on this show. We had like such an amazing conversation here right now, and so did yesterday.
And also check out his podcast where he interviewed us. It's gonna come out later.
Yeah, so now it's time to recap Dr. Evan's key points.
You are made of cells. Your cells have mitochondria. Our body can't function well if our mitochondria isn't working well. There are a lot of things that can affect our cells that can influence our energy.
And beware of Dr. Evan's toxic 5: heavy metals, mold, chemicals, chronic infections, and stress patterns, like trauma.
You want your brain to function right. If you want energy and simple there are simple habits every day and that can be beneficial.
Yeah.
Start every day with water.
Yep. Having a gratitude practice is more important than you think, and it programs your nervous system that if you're safe, loved, and enough.
And like, how are you doing with your food, sleep, and other lifestyle habits that all influence your amount of energy?
Toxicity, nutrients deficiencies, long COVID are some key factors that could be leading to your chronic fatigue.
And thank you everyone for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Zain Ansari.
I'm Moth.
And I'm Qasim.
Follow my family and I on social media, Holistic Mom D and Holistic Kid Show, and look out for our new best-selling book, The Teen Health Revolution. And kids need to learn from other kids. Please download our podcast in iTunes and leave a review so other kids and families can benefit. We need to create a healthy future for all of us and the planet. Join us next week for another episode of the Holistic Kid Show, where kids are empowering kids. Thank you, everyone.